Strack.
Aye.
Matt.
Aye.
Braden. Aye. Parkinson. Aye.
I don't think we have any public comments, so, we're gonna put off the civics curriculum tech presentation until next meeting because Jason's not here, he's the one who asked for it. So we'll just have John do the first look at the budget. I assume we can vote.
Have it up on the screen. No, you're fine.
Oh, okay.
You don't need to pull it down. So you'll notice this is a little bit different than what was in the board packet. There was some more information that came in the last 2 days. I'll be right back. I wanted to give you the most up-to-date version that we have available. So really briefly, a couple of quick notes. We're still finalizing pieces of the budget. This is still substantially what Chris had presented to you guys back in the spring. So there aren't too many changes overall. There are some grants that we're also still working on finalizing the numbers for, as the federal grants, and the federal year starts September 1st. There's just a little bit of a delay and lag time usually in getting grant expenditures approved before we can actually budget them. You'll also notice in this version, some of the changes, the big changes would be for the capital project expenditures that we were still working on when Chris was preparing this back in the spring. So we have information like the debt certificates that came in and some interfund transfers, as well as all the expenditures that are related to the capital projects. It's a little different to walk into a district, and since I wasn't the one who built the budget, it takes a little bit longer for you to understand some of the things that went into it, because there's just conversations that happen throughout the course of a year that you weren't privy to, right? So there's just a little bit more stuff that I want to go through and make sure I understand everything go over with the fine-tooth comb, as I put here. And then, as I said, the only real material change is the solar panel project. This next slide is going to look very similar to what Chris had presented back in the spring. So salary increases of about 3.25%, medical HMO increase of 5.6%. So you'll see a lot of it's just going to be very similar to what you had seen previously, but I kept it in here so that you guys could have something to review, as to know that this is, again, relatively the same. Then going through fund by fund. So I have the education fund numbers. A couple of things to highlight in there is we are projecting a surplus in the education fund. A lot of that surplus is going to be related to the additional tier funding that we got from the state for evidence-based funding. So that's positive news. You can see generally some of the notes that I have in there as well about different things that, and highlighted other areas that are just interesting to me. Specifically in the expenditure section, you'll see there's areas where they're down or where they're up, and that's some of the stuff that I was referring to, wanting to do a little bit more of going over it with a fine-tooth comb to understand how Chris got to some of those numbers. And he had great reasons for it, I don't have his notes on that yet. So, operations and maintenance fund, you'll see that there is, I just wanted to highlight in there that we do have some increase in other local revenue projected. That's for the Frederick bus parking lot. So we're projecting obviously getting some additional revenue for that. And then obviously the offset below in the expenditures is the capital outlay. Even though overall we're gonna have a big drop in that general account due to the fact that we had a GMS roof in last fiscal year's budget. It isn't a huge drop because we still have the Frederick parking lot in there. Overall, we're projecting a small deficit in that area, but nothing that isn't more than sustainable with our fund balance. Debt service is debt service. It's the easiest thing to budget. You have a mortgage payment. You know how much your mortgage payment is every year, and the county levies how much you're going to, they tell you how much you're going to levy in that area. So this one is nice and simple and easy for the debt service. Transportation fund, just a couple of things to highlight in there. We had a little bit of decrease in federal and state funding. Some of that had to do with the timing of categorical payments from the state, as well as just some reallocation of state fund some grant funding from transportation to supplies or other areas in the budget. But as you can tell, it's not a significant amount. We still have the expenditure for the benefits and the salary for our transportation coordinator in the budget. Ellen is still working on a plan for that and what we're gonna do with that, but I kept it in there because, well, we were still planning on it at the time that most of this was written, so. You'll see also, again, it's just projecting a small surplus, which is wonderful. For the retirement fund, this is another one of those relatively easy things to budget for. You know roughly how much FICA is going to be every year in IMRF and FICA, Medicare, IMRF. So this is pretty straightforward. Again, we're projecting just a very small, inconsequential surplus in that account. And then finally, we're going to see the big change in our budget, which is going to have the biggest impact on it, and that's our capital projects fund. You'll notice that for fiscal year 19, we're projecting about $5,970 in other local revenue. Of that, $4 million is our debt certificates, and then about $1.95 million of that is going to be an interfund transfer. For that, it's basically just taking advantage of developer fees that we already had available to us for Park and Prairie View to try to work on the solar project. And then obviously you'll see below that what we have left after making a pretty large payment in last fiscal year for the solar panels. We also have we have the balance of the solar panel project for this year's budget. And with balancing the fund transfers and the debt certificates, we'll have a nice, about even balance overall. For working cash fund, this is the fund that right now we have projected for covering the balance of the solar panels. There's still some more. This is another one of those fine-tooth comb things where we have money in the bank from developer fees, but then it's tying the money from the developer fees to which account it was originally deposited into. So right now I have it coming out of working cash fund, but that might change in the future. But I just wanted to highlight that as that cost of coming from one of our funds to cover it. And then you'll see that obviously causes us to have a pretty large deficit in that fund, but it's not an actual operating fund in terms of there's not any real expenditures other than transfers that really happen from working cash fund. So, and then finally the tort fund, which is the tort fund. It's small, but we love it. Finally, so we have the overall look at the revenues from looking at the budget from fiscal year 18 to fiscal year 19. You'll see there is that large jump in revenue and that large jump in expenses. And again, that literally is just completely tied to the solar panel project. So even though at the bottom it looks scary, there's a negative number. However, if you take out the solar expenditures and some of the other capital projects that we've chosen to not borrow for, but spend some of our bank balance, right? Spend some of our fund balance down to take care of that. Overall, we should be running a surplus in the current fiscal year. So. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Board reports? Anyone has anything you want to share? I will say that back to school night at GMS, I think the format was different than last year.
Yes.
It was much better.
Good, and that's what
I mean,
we're
they kind of
hearing.
did it like the high school does it.
Yes, they did, yeah.
So that was kind of nice, but, so we go to their classrooms to talk to the teachers and they tell us about what they're gonna do this year. It was easier to get to know the teacher a little bit though. So,
Good. That's what Marcus is hearing from most parents, is that they appreciated that change.
yeah, definitely.
I had the governing board and executive board meeting for September for CEDAL. So the superintendent asked me to share that we passed a budget for fiscal year for CEDAL. And she's inviting member district board members to come for a tour. You can call directly to the office and she'd be happy to walk you around, or a staff member. She's trying to get involved with all the member districts. And on September 19th at 1:30, I believe in the afternoon, I'm assuming, or not in the morning, there's going to be an informational session on those changes coming to the IDEA funding and how that's not going to flow through CEDAL anymore, but come directly to the district. So there's also an invitation out there for board members and community members to come and find out a little bit more about how that's going to be handled and how CEDAL is going to be able to help districts figure that out.
And that'll be something you'll probably want to attend just because we need to, not for this year, but next year, to alter the budget, modify the budget.
And that invitation goes to staff and faculty too, so anybody who wants a tour, seems to be very keen.
I had addressed, well, through Heather, a concern I had with one of our classes from CEDAW. They were walking out with the little ropes, which just drives me crazy when I see a bunch of kids on the little ropes. And she was great. She got right back to Heather and said, yes, I know, I understand what you're saying. And so she's really good to work with. I'm very pleased.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Barn Fest was great.
Yes, it was.
Tom's not here to give a update, so I was just a participant. It was my very first Barn Fest, and super fun, well attended. Hopefully raised, I didn't get the total, did I get the total?
No, I don't.
How much was raised for the foundation? But it was great. I'm hoping to get more Meadowview participation. We were sadly not too many Meadowview folks out and about, so that's our goal next year, is to get a few more Meadowview parents and teachers involved. It was very fun.
Good. Ellen, Sharon?
So next week, on the 13th, is when the search firm will be here to meet with the different groups. They meet with DOs, the district office staff, administrators at 2, the union officers at 2:45, staff, they have them separated out, the PSRP and the certified staff at 3:45, and then board members. And then the community forums at 7 o'clock. Then they're looking at a couple of dates, 11/13 or 11/14. 11/14 is a board meeting when they would bring 10 to 12 candidates to review their resumes and after they have interviewed them. So it's not an interview, it's just to talk about the slate of candidates, and then they will sometime after that bring you 6 candidates to look at. So 11/13 tentatively, is that work, Kathleen?
That'll work for me.
What's the date?
11/13, it's a Tuesday night. We would have it at the district office
In the evening?
in the evening, yeah, 6:30. Or 7 if that's better, whatever. It would work with you?
Evening's fine.
Thanks.
It works for you? Okay, well, what's better, 6:30 or 7? Either, Kathleen?
Okay.
7?
7? Okay. They said it would last about an hour and a half, so.
Oh, this is the.
6:30? Okay,
The
6:30,
resume.
Thursday was 6:30.
Wait.
Okay.
These would be the 10 to 12 candidates?
Yes, and then you will work with them on that night on identifying the interview dates for the other. And the only other thing, we're still trying to look at the enrollment. Right now, it looks like we're down about 80, but because it's right after Labor Day, we often get a lot of students in this week. So hopefully next board meeting, I'll have a better idea of exactly what it is. And then I want to compare that to what Pizarro said, so
Okay.
we can see where we are on track with that. And that's all I have.
So it's the third week, what day?
It's a Tuesday.
November
13th.
November
At
13th.
6:30, right?
Yes,
I just want to make sure.
and I'll add that to the weekly update so that you can add that to that.
Do we have any committee reports? Do we have any committee meetings?
We have the Evaluation Assessment Curriculum Committee on September 13th, and the Diversity Committee September 12th. So the next meeting will have reports on both.
Alrighty.
And I think the agendas have gone out on both, so.
I'm gonna send an article on, NWEA NUC, and it's from the Evanston Roundtable, so I'll send it to everybody,
Yeah.
but I hope to discuss it.
At the We've got NWA right on the agenda, so it'll fit right in, perfect.
Next, is a consent agenda. If I could have a motion to approve the consent agenda, including the addendum to the personnel report.
So moved.
Second.
Braden,
Aye.
Parkinson,
Aye.
Strack,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Motion carries. Is it just the one? No, two. Action items, first, if I could have a motion to approve the resolution hazardous conditions eligible for transportation.
These are the same ones that we've had. There's no changes right now.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions?
Mack,
Aye.
Parkinson,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
Strack.
Aye. Motion carries. And then if I could have a motion to approve the adoption of a resolution authorizing Scariano, Hines, and Petrarca to intervene on the school district's behalf in the 2017 tax year proceedings before the Illinois Property Tax Appeal Board.
So moved.
Second.
Second verse, second verse.
Braden,
Aye.
Strack,
Aye.
Parkinson,
Aye.
Mack.
Aye.
Motion carries. Update on the solar project.
Keith?
Well, we're going to, as of Saturday, 6 o'clock in the morning, turn all the power off at Prairie View, and they're going to approximately 4 to 6 hours to hook it up, and we'll fire it back up and see what we got. So it's kind of an exciting moment. What was it, Fredericks is?
The 15th.
Yeah, the 15th tentatively, that's pending on ComEd. And Park, they're probably another 3 weeks past that. And we're still waiting for a timeline on the middle school when they're gonna start that. But things are looking good, very excited. Questions? I mean,
Has the rain been a problem recently?
has there been?
Has the rain been a problem recently?
No, because the panels are in. It's more been the electrician, been pulling wire from the fields to the school.
Yeah.
We've been in touch with IT for the
For the cutover on
Yeah,
Saturday morning?
Yeah, the cutover on Saturday morning, and for what performance services needs from us for data stuff, so, but everything's been progressing really quite nicely.
And if you'll notice back at Frederick, where there's only a fence.
Oh, yeah.
Partial fence, and we're in the process of getting approval for the rest of it, so we should be okay with that.
Good.
It's looking good.
All right, thank you. Next, new business. The first two items, Tom had asked if we could delay talking about those until the next meeting when he's here and everyone's here. So,
Can I ask something about
Yeah.
that? We redefined our priorities right before Jill was leaving.
Yeah, those are the ones that we,
Really?
Yeah.
we had a longer
Yeah.
list.
Yeah.
Well, but those were the
But I
top
mean,
four.
before that,
Yeah.
we had a longer list.
We had a longer list, and those were the four that were voted on, that were the top four.
Was that the order of them?
Yes, they were 7, 7, 6, 6. And I put them down exactly as we had them on the, so
It
seven.
just seems like much less, but.
Yeah.
some
But I
are
mean, so the point of that discussion is to come up with
New ones.
new ones, or, redo the ones that we have. Or
Well, and also, we have to make some discussions, perhaps a discussion on the, how to use the funds, the
Yeah.
evidence-based.
Yeah, and the second item is the evidence-based funds and how to use that. The state does need a recommendation from us by the end of the month, but we can provide that to them at any time and then change it if we need to. So we do have another meeting on the 19th. So, I mean, we'll talk about it then,
Sure.
obviously, but,
Mhm.
so if we can delay that as well, we'll do that. So then next would just be, the only other thing is the IGA with, between us and the park district.
Right, and, because Mark was out and because Marlo was out, we don't have all the information that you had requested about how much,
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
so,
I'd asked for information about, what was it,
how much we
how
spent.
much it's cost us, how much they
Mhm.
paid us,
And our schedule of fees.
schedule of fees and that sort of thing. I think the schedule of fees is actually on that, on the agreement, if I remember right. I don't know if that's the current one though.
I
So
believe
then,
it is.
unfortunately, we'll have to hold off until that next one too.
Okay. Has the current agreement
It was, it,
worked?
yes, it's
Worked
been
okay
fine,
for us?
yeah. It, you know, we had that, we agreed that if there were gonna be any change in fees on either side, it was gonna, we were gonna make sure it was done by January, just so that when we're getting ready for the summer charges, that they had plenty of time to let,
Change the books and
Yeah.
what they send out to the parents.
so when we were talking about this the other day, not this current summer, but the summer before, we probably made some money because it was a cooler summer, we didn't have the air conditioning on as much. Whereas this year, it was hotter. So, you know, the seasons balance
Yeah.
out, so.
Okay, we can discuss that more
Mhm.
at a later time, once you have that information in.
Yep.
That's all right. Anybody have any topics for future agenda items?
I've got a whole list. I'd like to have Heather do an ECAT presentation in October 17th. Just to, you know, you agreed to have the ECAT team, but let's find out what they've been doing since we brought them in and how many students they've tested and what kinds of things we've seen. Of course, the Park District will have their presentation on civics and technology. There's been concerns with not having enough substitutes. The one year we did a substitute job fair, which we might do again, but also I asked Jen to do a comparison with other districts, what they're paying their subs, and so he's gonna bring that and show that, and then we can see whether we feel like we need to increase it a little bit. And also Jason had asked about an updated solar project revenue,
Okay.
so we'll do that.
Do you happen to know just what, like, the area average is for
It's around
subs?
100,
That's what
105,
I figured,
and we're a little bit lower than that.
Per
Now,
day,
one-
right?
Yeah.
Per day.
Now, once they're here, once they're subbed for a number of days, then it raises to what, 120, I think, but
190.
190, well, that's a little off, 120. But day to day, it's a little lower, not a lot, but.
During one of our, meetings, we were in closed session, not gonna repeat anything from that, but I happened to just start looking at teacher attendance numbers in the ISB data set. So they have 2 years of teacher attendance, and our district has very low teacher attendance. We
Mhm.
have a significant, the majority of our teachers missing more than 10 days during the school year. And I'm just wondering if it's because, you know, their parents, they need to take the day off because they have to go see their child at their school, just, you know, vacation. I'm just wondering,
I wouldn't necessarily know the reasons other than if they're asking for days right before a vacation or if they're asking for personal days. I know that at least at GMS, they've really put a lot of emphasis on trying to be there.
well, and I'll share the numbers with you.
Sure.
I'm curious too. At best, it's an error in reporting to the state.
It could be,
Um,
but at least we
just
should
some
look
of the
at it.
discrepancies, and it seems like some schools, maybe they did, you know, do a much better job the following year. Is it something that our buildings are, how does it get reported from the district to ISB?
It would go through Infinite Campus.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, it might even just be maybe there's some error in the data.
Yeah, we can take a look at that. I'd love to have you share it. Yeah, we can.
Or how absences are reported and what they count in that?
Oh, it's,
Is it
if you
everything?
miss more than 10 days.
But it doesn't matter if it's vacation or illness or whatever.
It just-
Well, if you're.
Is it coded in?
Absent.
in the
Just coded absent, and that's the way the new attendance for students is gonna be too. It's not gonna make, they don't care whether there's excused or unexcused or
It's just
anything, it's
days.
just days. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so what I'm wondering too is are we maybe interpreting it differently than other districts? It's
Well,
something to.
right, and, you know, we had a lot of release days for curriculum work.
Well, see, to me, those shouldn't be absent days because they are,
But they're counted, so that's,
why?
that's,
Because they're out of the classroom, so that's the definition.
So it's any time they're out of the classroom?
yes.
So even
Well,
if
that
you're providing
explains it,
support for your
because we are doing
staff?
so much PD.
It doesn't make any difference, because we're getting
We're
subs
doing
in
more-
there,
We're doing more PD.
and, right,
So
but we're
with the
getting
common
subs.
assessments. and-
Yeah.
So we get docked for providing more support for our
Yeah.
Well,
staff.
that answers it.
It makes no sense.
Okay, that makes no sense.
We know
Yeah, so I'll send it.
Yeah, that'd be
and
great.
You can kind of see.
Yeah. Well, we'll be able to
Even
take
if
it.
it was PD, then you can see like a jump from 35% to 90, or,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, so.
Yeah, that's good.
Anything else?
Truck.
Oh, yes, truck.
Just truck.
Truck.
Just yell that, truck.
Purchasing of a new, truck for the district.
Okay.
And that was in the original budget when, Chris,
So pickup or,
Yeah.
we bought one a few years ago, didn't we?
yes.
16.
This is a different one than that was.
It's replacing the 2000.
2000? Wow.
And then just as a reminder too, this was a quick budget hearing, but, or quick budget presentation, but the formal budget hearing that was posted will be at the next board meeting.
Right,
And that's at 6 o'clock prior to the meeting, right?
yes.
So I get to go through this all again.
Keeps us on our toes.
I bet.
I want to add about, as a teacher, when I was looking for jobs, I wouldn't even apply for schools that have low teacher attendance. So it's interesting.
That, yeah,
Because
that
it
could have
really is
impact.
a signal of, a building that's not well enough.
Right.
So,
No, that's a good point.
yeah, I mean, it's something to
Mhm.
maybe,
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't
that's-
know, think about as far as.
That should certainly raise the percentage. Take that out of the equation.
Yeah.
At
Yeah,
least
but
just
if
for
that's
our
the
own
way-
knowledge, you know.
Yeah, but if that's the way it's being advertised, there's a way that you can kind of combat that with,
Right.
advertising the wonderful PD that you do with teachers if you want to attract teachers.
Okay. Any more public comments about trucks? I don't think we need a closed session, so then if I get a motion to adjourn?
So, second,
Parkinson,
aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Strack,
Aye.
Brady.
Aye.
Thank you.